Happy holidays, everyone. I'm Mark Janes. Welcome again to the Hornet Spotlight, where we induct another member into the ever-growing Beech Grove High School Hall of Fame. And pretty anxious and excited to have conversations with a gentleman who was a 2001 graduate of Beech Grove, Siraj Patel. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back to Beech Grove. I say that, but there's not really much reason to welcome you back to Beech Grove because you come back on a pretty regular basis.
I do. I'm back probably once every at least couple months at the least, but during football season, during cold season, once every couple of weeks usually.
Yeah. And this was a good trip. I mean, not only was it a holiday weekend, but a big win over the Washington Redskins.
That's right. That's right.
So, a 2001 graduate of Beech Grove High School. So let's, as we always do when we have our Hall of Fame inductees come back, talk a little bit about what life was like at Beech Grove High School for you around 1999 to 2001.
I mean, I remember as soon as I could walk up this building and think about those days. Some of the best years ever. I really loved being here for high school. It was probably pretty much the exact same as it is now for most students. I remember coming here sometimes at like 6 or 7 in the morning to do track practice early because I had drivers at late, or did play practice after school or whatever. So I was here pretty much like a second home for the 4 years I was here, and loved every minute of it.
If you weren't involved in an extracurricular activity, it's probably because we didn't offer it. Is that pretty close to being correct?
Yeah, sometimes if there wasn't one, I'd make one. So there was a lot going on at the time. I'm sure there still is. So.
Well, you left Beech Grove in 2001, and you went to Stanford, and a little taste of politics started seeping in when you were in high school, class president 4 years, and then involved in council. And so what led you to Stanford University?
I mean, it's California.
I don't blame you. Yeah, I understand that.
No, it's a wonderful place. I like that it's challenging and rigorous, but also extremely well-rounded. Sports and other outside of academics activities and things like that. But it's super innovative and not sort of bogged down in old school tradition, things like that. So I kind of like it. I like the idea that it's a little bit outside the box.
What did you study at Stanford?
Political science.
Political science. And as we mentioned, he was a 4-year class president, so kind of makes sense that he would take that path towards political science. Now, was there any wow factor at all coming from a community that's, I think it's still to this day relatively small and close-knit and tight? Was there any wow factor at all when you first went to Stanford, or were there any travels at all that prepared you for that leading up to high school?
I'd say, quite a bit of a wow factor in a sense that, for being fully immersed somewhere that's so different. And so the student body comes from pretty much everywhere in the entire world.
Right.
And is used to doing, pretty amazing things across the board, no doubt. But that being said, I wouldn't say that I felt in any way behind or not fully prepared. I think that everything offered here, we had plenty of AP classes by then and things like that. Coming from my background, I traveled a bunch growing up. My family moved around a bunch. I immigrated to the United States 20 years before I was born, or 10 years before I was born. So I mean, I've had that exposure to different perspectives and things going in. But I would say at least there was some wow factor,
yeah,
for sure.
Well, one of the things that helped prepare you for your time at Stanford and even fostered that interest in politics and lead you to political science, you were instrumental in the creation of the School to Work program here at Beech Grove High School, and that led you to have an opportunity to serve with Mayor Bart Peterson?
That's right. I think that it sort of stemmed from doing we did a youth council thing. They had 2 students from every high school in Marion County, do once a month sort of meetings at the mayor's office, talking about issues. I think it stemmed from a school shooting or something at the time. Columbine. It was actually, that's what it was. And so, sad beginning. But we basically, working there, I thought, being on that council, I thought it'd be great if I could spend 1 or 2 class periods per week working out of the mayor's office on special projects or something as a high schooler. So I approached Mr. Warner at the time, and along with a couple other faculty members, decided it'd be great if we could do class credit for work program, sort of like C9, but
Sure.
but you know, if you create your own thing. And so we had some people working at the Indianapolis Star, we had people going to different businesses around the city, and I was at the mayor's office. That was really excellent. I mean, it was an exciting time. It was, you know, testament to how open-minded the faculty was here to say, hey, you know, if you want to do this, take the initiative to do this, you can get it done.
Yeah. And you'll be happy to know that that mindset continues here. Our administration is very, very supportive of innovative efforts in ways to get our students more involved with day-to-day hands-on experience. Now, from Stanford, NYU, School of Law, and you graduated from there in 2009, but is it safe to say that from the time you graduated from Stanford in 05 and to that 09 NYU law degree, that was a pretty interesting 4-year period for you?
It really was. And so actually, technically, I didn't graduate until 2010 because I went to law school. After living back here in Beech Grove for a year, I was working with my family. We do real estate development around the country. So, you know, before I went to law school, before I knew I wanted to go for sure, I came back here and worked full-time for the year, traveling quite a bit and doing a bunch of new development, and it was really exciting, great experience, and prepared me for law school a lot more, let's say. Just having a job before going back to school gives you that perspective when you go back to school that, you know, it's a privilege, and to not take it for granted.
Sure.
So, but then, you know, at school, I did, you know, during the summers, I did legal internships at big law firms in Washington and London. And to management consulting, realized that, you know, maybe this wasn't my path working for a large organization. Maybe it's because I never did it before, that my family and my role models all sort of created their own businesses and jobs. So, you know, somewhere down the line, there was a big election, and I decided to join the Obama campaign back in 2008 in the summer. I spent most of that year traveling around the country ahead of then Senator Obama. Before the election, we did advance work, so we'd travel 6 or 7 days ahead of the candidate, preparing big rallies or events or media avails, or most of the time fundraisers and all that stuff all combined. He would land, we'd staff him through the day, be a big 18, 20-hour day, exhausting. And as you're just coming down and they're taking off, you know, you get your BlackBerry out and there was like, here's your next place and here's your next flight information. And you'd fly maybe from Iowa to Florida and Florida to New Hampshire and whatever. And so I was in like 20-some states in a matter of like 4 months, traveling 6 or 7 days every, you know, out of a suitcase. So really exciting time. Then went back and I finished law school. Did some of that in Argentina. Decided, you know, to take the opportunity while I had I called it a free summer, free semester, because I wouldn't have otherwise had it if I didn't take the time off to work for the campaign. And then came back and started working, you know, on some business ventures and startups, and then back for my family.
Well, I can't let the cavalier mention of Argentina go. I mean, so let us know a little bit about what led you to Argentina and what it is you did there, and what was that experience like?
Well, I mean, so it was, you know, everyone that I knew had graduated from law school in May, and I still had a semester to finish up, and I thought, well, rather than wait, let me go and do this somewhere where I can work on 2 skills at once. And the neat thing there was that I just sort of enrolled at the University of Palermo in Buenos Aires, and it was taught in Spanish. And so I did half my classes at business school and half my classes at law school in Spanish. And probably the harder part of that was not the schooling at all, but was the reading, writing, and taking exams.
Oh, okay.
And so I just thought it would be a good opportunity to do a little bit of both. I'd traveled there before, loved it. One of my favorite places in the world. So I knew I'd come back and live at some point, and I went ahead and knocked that one off my bucket list early.
That's a pretty impressive thing to knock off one's bucket list. There's no question about that. That's very impressive. Now, you weren't done with the Obama campaign.
That's right. In 2012, I took a sabbatical from work and went back, this time in a more political capacity, doing public outreach, political outreach. So I was in Charlotte for the convention for two months or so. It was just a really neat way to check off more places to live and
sure.
experience. And, you know, I like traveling a lot, but more than just traveling. I really like setting down roots for a couple months at least somewhere. Really get the idea of, you know, like I don't think that you get a full idea of whether, you know, living somewhere until you've maybe worked there, picked up dry cleaning. There's normal day-to-day things that you want to do that like make you less of a tourist and more of an actual resident. So anyway, Charlotte, and then I was back in Chicago for the 2 months leading up to the election, and then Washington, D.C. for the inauguration on inaugural committee staff. So it was a really great experience to get pieces of that in. I think that's just a testament to we talked about it earlier. The technology enables you to sort of be in multiple places at once. Heck, most of the time people don't even know that I deal with on conference calls or emails or whatever, both for work or for political stuff or anything, where I am, because it's pretty seamless. And I think it's an opportunity that 10 years ago you didn't have. I think there's a reason that you see more and more people leaving work, leaving college, and doing multiple things, working from home, following their passions,
Sure.
still making a living, maybe not, working for the same company for 30, 35 years and retiring with a pension. And maybe that's partially because those opportunities are fewer and further in between right now with the changing economic sector. But I would also say that maybe part of that is because people want that. I think part of that is just the way you're hardwired growing up with the massive information that is constantly at your fingertips and on your computer and on your phone and everywhere, that you have multiple interests. Sure. And you have the luxury of following those multiple interests. And so that's something that I don't think that we shy away from and say, well, shoot, what's going on with these kids, what's going on with this generation. Maybe you just say, look, it's just different.
Sure.
It's not deficient.
Well, I have to ask, it's been portrayed in documentaries talking about campaigns, and they've been portrayed in movies. Who knows how accurate they are or aren't? Well, maybe you do. Is there anything you've ever been involved in that covers a wider range of emotions, physically, mentally, emotionally, than a campaign? And is it the most difficult thing you've ever been a part of, especially that period when you were moving to a different city every 7 days and doing the advance work?
Yeah, I would say hands down, nothing compares. I think that the depictions of campaigns are actually pretty accurate. Sure, they're sensationalized, but you know what? Campaigns are sensationalized. I mean, politics is sensationalized, unfortunately, for better or worse. It just is. And I do think that, those, to get 3,000, 4,000 people, often extremely young, often with lots of talent, tons of potential, to work for pretty much minimum wage, if not less if you count it hourly.
Oh, sure.
Definitely less, actually. Behind a goal and pretty much sacrifice. I mean, for that 6 months, you have a wedding, it's too bad. You have something to go, you know what I mean? Like, it's very hard to get out of there. Because there's a million people that want to take that spot anyway in the first place. But also, it's really important because it's a sprint to that finish line, because you can't leave November 5th or whatever it is thinking that there was a little bit more that could have been done. I think there's something to be said about how someone can grab you both mentally and emotionally, some actual cause, and focus that much energy positively towards a single goal. It's not too different from a sports team or anyone else going for some championship. And I'm not saying this politically in terms of left or right or anything. Both like we had great friends on the other campaigns that we'd see once in a while when you had debates or something with both candidates together. And there's a mutual respect there, because I think that, that night, those nights, and those election night or whatever, when you have all 3,000 people sort of, or, the staff event afterwards or whatever, in one room, you realize that there's not that much talent and energy and creativity focused on one goal in any other room in the world, except for maybe the opponent's camp as well. But that's about it. I mean, that's a lot of power to be able to capture that many people's imaginations and energy. I mean, that's not just talking about staff. I'm talking about the millions of people who put in hours volunteering for nothing, on top of the staff that puts in the whole 6-7 months of their lives all the way through. I think there's something powerful. I know we really hate campaigns lately because they're frankly pretty terrible on the airwaves and negative and fairly miserable to watch, and sometimes we see why do we have 25-27% turnout. I mean, obviously it's because we get the campaigns we deserve, we get the campaigns we demand. We don't demand that much better, it turns out, because people win when they do it this way. But the flip side is that there is something to be said about the positivity and the civic engagement that somebody can inspire or that a cause inspire that puts people working towards a single goal. And it's very rare to find that. Corporations spend millions, billions of dollars a year trying to figure out how to get their culture and organization to be aimed and focused towards one goal. And they can spend millions of dollars on salaries doing it, but it's a testament to say that someone can spend a fraction of that for a cause, which I guess goes to show you how powerful that could be.
Now, you developed a pretty impressive resume, I'll say, before you ever became involved in the campaign. That said, has there ever been some quiet reflection personally that a kid from Beech Grove, Indiana, has been so heavily involved in the election of the U.S. president twice, just actually being a part of it? Just when you're alone, maybe in a hotel room, do you think, man, this is cool? This is just cool.
Yeah, I mean, all the time. All the time, and I wouldn't say it's just that. I'm just generally anytime I'm anywhere doing something new. It's exciting to think that it's totally possible. It doesn't really matter where you. I mean, that's just a testament to how awesome and meritocratic our society is. That America probably is about the only place where you can just sort of show up, 10 years later, have 4 kids, go to high school, middle school, grade school, all in the same place, and go on to be far-flung all over the country and world and be able to keep doing it. That's only possible here. And definitely somewhere like Beech Grove, where it's super nurturing, super close-knit. And I'm glad it still remains that way.
So, in addition to these 8 years that you've been so heavily involved with the Obama campaign and the presidency and the inauguration, there's this little place in England called Cambridge that you kind of dipped your toe in the water there. So tell us a little bit about Cambridge, your experience.
Yeah, they had Cambridge had a desire to do a master's in public policy program modeled after some of the U.S. schools created this in the 60s. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard did it, but MPP, the degree that's a professionally focused, mid-career professional, like less academic and more practical degree. And they had their inaugural year last year, and it was a class of 22 of us from all over the world. And so I went to England and spent the 8 months, sort of not really 8 months there, but I spent 8 months getting a degree. But I was still working, so I came back and forth pretty much every few weeks. And again, one of those things where, like, had this been 10 years ago, impossible. But today, armed with an iPhone and being able to fly back and forth, it was pretty easy to knock out both things at once. But no, what an amazing experience to be able to go to one of the neatest places in the world and one of the oldest centers of education in the world, dress up like Harry Potter and go to class in capes, and go learn among some of the brightest, best students I've ever worked with, and some of the most impressive people ever. We wrote a bunch of policy papers. I had to do an internship somewhere. I did it at the White House, at the U.S. Trade Rep as a sort of policy fellow, for 8 weeks as part of that. And what an incredible experience to work both in Washington and then back in England, back and forth, and help get this program off the ground this first year with Growing Pains. And now it's thriving. It goes on, and it'll be a whole school of government there. It's sort of based off of American-style, technocratic, education towards getting civil servants and high-level government officials ready to actually do the business of governing. So it's really interesting, and I think I'm going to end up using that in the future if I ever go work in public service at all in some role, if that ever happens. But even if not, I'm going to try. I think working with NYU right now to teach at business school next year, a class that sort of I'm preparing on business, politics, and policy, which sort of gets the person in a firm ready for the environment around them that shapes their regulations, their laws, why it happens, what the incentives are for someone to make some set of policy. It's important for everyone to know. It's important for everyone to know what policy framework is around them and what they can predict, so that they can prepare for the future. And that could go for anyone, be that a homeowner or anyone.
Sure.
You should know. Because I think the takeaway from this program is that policy matters. Their outcomes are dependent on what, I mean, they were actually quite good at it now.
No question.
If we know we want housing market to heat up, we know we can securitize mortgages, we know we can lower interest rates, we know these things, and they work.
Sure.
So it's important for you to know on the receiving end of this why it's happening, and if you want to shape it, why and how you should.
Before we let you go, I want to spend a couple of minutes talking a little bit about the family business. And this is not accurate. Feel free to correct me, but I'm under the assumption that in that year or so while you were in college, maybe after you graduated from Stanford, in that year or so, you were heavily involved in some pretty impressive growth in your family's company. Do I understand it right? It was more focused on Indiana, and then during that period of time that you were more heavily involved, you actually started to expand, and now you're in several states all across the U.S.?
That's right. I mean, before I came back from college, we had already, we'd done the bulk of our hotels and properties, and our development was in Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, and Mississippi, where my family's also from. But even before I came, we had started looking at some other markets. But during that year, we did 4 new projects in Florida, 2 in California, and 3 in New Jersey, sort of north, with all 4 corners, we're kind of touching in the country. And then since then, we've grown into a lot of these markets: California, New Jersey, New York area, Florida, Texas, some where the growth is. We still have a huge presence in the Midwest. Our headquarters is still here. But I mean, we sort of went during this period in the mid-2000s from being a regional company to a full-on national one, and continue to do so now, doing new strategic developments in a lot of places. One of my biggest interests, hands down, is revitalizing urban cores. I don't think that it's not a revitalization for the sake of it. I think that that's just the future. I think that if you look at downtown Indianapolis, and then we're just a few years behind a lot of these other places: Pittsburgh, Nashville, Austin, and then it's certainly New York in the 90s, and places like that where people want to move. I think there's just less of a premium for space. I think that there's more of a premium for accessibility, being close to people that, have a diverse set of interests in arts and music, and being able to walk to the grocery store rather than drive. I think that's just a generational shift, and we're at the beginning of this generational shift towards refilling those urban cores. And again, we see it in just our own downtown here. And I think it's amazing to be able to take some of these old use buildings, but back when there were these massive office buildings, and be able to convert them to better use, be that condominiums or hotels or whatever, because I think that is where the future is. I know that it seems like it's too late, but it's not. I just think that this is just the beginning. I'm maybe the beginning of that generational shift. That means there's 20, 25 years worth of people behind me that come into income and spending every single day. Then I think that portends really well for us from a whole variety of standpoints, be that culturally, being closer together to people that are not necessarily always the exact same as us, environmentally, ecologically. I think it's just better. So I like it both from those perspectives, but also economically. So that's some of our focus right now, is looking at buildings in the urban cores around the country, in towns like Indianapolis, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and trying to capture that wave as well.
We could have done a whole show on that, I think. Before we let you go, because we know you got to get to the airport, we appreciate you taking the time this morning to stop by. In the 3 years that I've done this, your accomplishments are as impressive as anyone that we've talked to in our 3 years. And congratulations on that, by the way. Where does the foundation laid here at Beech Grove fit in terms of the importance and the ability to achieve that long-term success? How big of an influence was it on your success long-term?
Huge. I think there's 2 things that come from a place like Beech Grove, a school like Beech Grove. I think that we have such a nurturing, we're big enough and close enough to a large city that the world's your oyster. I mean, you should get out there as much as you can and take advantage of everything that's there in the city. That being said, we're small enough and nurturing enough to where you feel like you always have a safety net. there's always a fallback. It's that people will catch you. So you should take those risks that are available to you in the world. When you are conditioned to do that in your formative years through grade school, elementary school, and high school, you carry that with you, I think, going forward, whether or not the safety net still exists. I think there's something to be said about a place like here that allows you to go do 10, 15 extracurricular activities while you're in high school, gets you ready to really go out there and be busy all the time and work on things, but also give back and work. I think that there is something about Beech Grove that makes you empathize a little bit easier because of the way that this community is, how tight-knit it is, how quickly it is changing for the better, I think. And it's always been a really welcoming place. And I think the high school and just school here is an embodiment of that. I think that if you want to do it, this faculty, this staff, and the culture here is to let you go do it. I mean, we're small enough to manage it, but big enough to not be left out.
Well, safe travels to you.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Welcome to the Beech Grove Hall of Fame.
Thanks.
We appreciate the opportunity. We want to thank Randy Clevenger, Vice Principal here at Beech Grove High School, for securing the services and arranging for the interview. Also, thanks to Wiley Craft for producing the show. A lot of changes in schedule this time of year because of the holidays, getting ready for second semester. If you have any questions at all about the schedule and things like end of semester exams, go to the Beech Grove High School website. All of that information is available 24/7. I'm Mark Jane. So long for now.